right. Welcome into the half. My name is Aaron Montgomery, and you can find me at oursuccessgroup.com. Right next to me is this fine gentleman, Erich Campbell, where you can see him over at erichcampbell.com. Erich, how are you doing today, sir? Looking good with your fancy background there.
Yeah, I finally have the green screen back in effect, folks. But yeah, that's it works. I like the green screen. I mean, admittedly, I like Aaron's work too because having a little bit more depth is a little more natural. But for me, I prefer the green screen sometimes. I do enjoy it.
It's good. It's good.
It's
It's
not too
really
bad,
good.
but doing
Yeah.
okay. Happy to have the green screen back. There's something about having the admittedly fake machine behind me that I do like. Honestly, I like having a little control over that background when I can.
There you go. Looking good. Awesome. All right. Well, checking in. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is here for everybody. But hello, Jeff. Good to see you.
Good to see you in.
And Chuck, good afternoon to you, sir.
Yes.
And Ramona talking about the two regular guys conversation we just got to have with Craig Mertens. Great conversation about graphics. Agreed. And
huge.
Oh, and hello.
Hey, we don't need to be polite here. Let's get right into it. Let's talk about graphics. Let's talk about business.
Yeah.
Two Other Guys was awesome this morning. So we got to talk about how to lead with graphics and how to handle graphics in your shops, in your apparel decoration world. Though certainly the idea of having to handle creative and handle any sort of art and creative adventure is something that a lot of people understand, certainly these days. But yeah, really cool to talk about graphics. Certainly we had some tribalism versus, Illustrator and Corel people are going to do what they do. We're going to have that sometimes. We're going to talk about stock designs versus no stock designs. But, it was still good to talk about the importance of graphics for sure.
Yeah, it definitely was a great conversation.
Yeah.
Cindy, hello. And then I love this, Bill. I appreciate this, actually putting fine gentlemen in quotes. I
scare quotes
feel
on
that.
Thanks,
he's met us. I know he's met me, but
I would say it's unfair, but
but
it is what it is.
All right. And then Mr. Fat Dad Wholesale himself, Todd Downing, checking in. Yo.
Yeah.
I think I got that this time.
You put a little lilt in there. I don't know. You want to go to the yodel angle?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
I've gotten into this. Hello, Chris, by the way. And,
yes.
Again,
Chris.
I've gotten into this weird thing that I've decided that I'm like, whenever I get excited about something and I want to congratulate somebody on something, I've decided this is how I give them a high five virtually on webcam. So you guys ready? Like, right? It
just a rain of high fives. The 1,000 palm slap is happening.
Like, take that. All right. Justin, thank you. Favorite 30 minutes of Fridays. I love it.
Hey, us too. Yep. I mean, Two Other Guys is great.
The take up is
take up.
Let's say it's not 30 minutes.
The take up has never been 30
minutes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it. The take up has never been 30 minutes.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, thanks for being here.
Yes.
And here we go, Jeff. Corel, Adobe. Let's go with Affinity.
I've been going Affinity for some time now, and this includes like professional design stuff, like packaging design for a major company. I may or may not have done that in Affinity. You certainly can do a lot in Affinity. But it is missing stuff. I am not going to lie to you. I work in Affinity Photo like every week. All my channel caps, all that stuff's in Affinity Photo. It doesn't have everything that Photoshop has, and sometimes you feel it, but it is inexpensive and good enough to do a lot of what we do. That's the truth.
Sorry, I'm giggling about Ramona's comment. I'm going to jump ahead.
We'll get there.
Is the take up supposed to be 30 minutes?
No, it's supposed to be an hour. And lately, what I do is 2 topics, and the first topic is now an hour. I finally gotten that done, but the second topic is usually 30 more minutes.
Justin, see, this is what I thought. The take up is my favorite 4 hours of Friday.
I hope it's not boring enough that it feels like 4 hours, but I don't know.
Yeah,
people join in. I hate there are people who do those entire streams where they stay streaming for weeks at a time. I think I'm good for it. If I could only make that, if I could make that money from Twitch, I'd be all about it. But my VTuber icons are not ready yet. I don't yet have my anime
bag and all that stuff, right?
Like I said, I don't have the anime avatar, and I'm just not cute enough to carry it for myself. So we at some point when I get my VTuber status, we can talk about how much longer we can make the take up.
There we go. All right. Well, let's get back to our Corel Adobe battle royale here, because you've got Todd saying Corel equals blue collar, Adobe equals hipster trash.
Like for the real, my thing is I go back and forth between both. I've used Corel since Corel 10, and I mean 10. That is way back when. And I have
I've
used
got you on that, by the way. Go
Adobe.
ahead.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. But for me, like I'm seriously, I've been using Corel for a very long time, and on top of that, I've used Adobe products since they were on a Mac Classic, and I'm not joking,
Wow.
black and white. When I was a
Wow.
a
Yeah, you
child.
got me on
I
that.
was not in the industry. I was a child the first time I was using Adobe Photoshop.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I have used both this whole time. There are things I like better in each one. It's hard because Adobe has all the industry standards. They really are the way that is the way it is in the graphics world. You can't argue that because coming with a Corel file to someone who is in the wider graphic design world is gonna, get you looked at funny. At the same time, I have never had a problem doing everything I need to do in
Yeah.
Corel. So I think the real problem is that people are saying Adobe versus Corel when they're like, no, it's design skill versus no design skill. And that's the real argument as to when something turns out. I hate to say it.
I love it. All right. Well, so I'll just give my part and piece on this here. And
Sure.
so here's the main thing for me. First and foremost, I do not have a need personally in the things that I've done to deal in vector graphics. So when I talk about Adobe,
shocking,
I know,
but okay.
when I talk about Adobe, I'm talking about Photoshop, right? So I'm a Photoshop guy, and I can do everything I need to do in Photoshop. I started with CorelDRAW version 3, and I actually designed a art print catalog piece in it back then, and this was when I was just out of high school. In fact, I have to dig that out because this was something that I did with my family. So I love Corel, and I still do. I think it's a great program. I think it does lots of great things. But like I said, for me, I do sublimation, I do direct to garment. Right? Those are the main decorating things that I've done. So why do I need vector graphics for? Right? I'm not cutting anything.
Like
I'm
I
not
almost can't
fixing
hear
anything.
it.
I'm not screen printing anything. I'm not separating anything. So
I have to bring in the comment from Todd on this one because this one's hard. No vector. What planet is Aaron from? I know I'm feeling that so hard, but at the same time, as an embroiderer, I'm going to alter any graphics you give me. Anything you give me is going to be reinterpreted into the medium of embroidery. And so every time I talk to somebody about that, they're like, well, do you prefer vector? I'm like, yeah, but not for why you think.
Yeah.
Yes, because I want to zoom in and have clean lines on my text because it's easier for me to follow when I'm digitizing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I've never converted vector into embroidery objects. I have done that. You have to edit the shape every time. So for me, it doesn't matter. I just want clean. If I can zoom in and it's clean, I don't care. But that's because I'm going to redraw everything for embroidery anyway. That's a different thing. But yeah, as somebody doing sublimation, I can't tell you how many times I went straight raster. I didn't bother redrawing anything if it was clean enough for sub. That's true too. I don't want to say that I'm going to get hunted down by the vector police, but absolutely,
well,
if something's clean enough and the colors are good and you can do a little work on it. Yeah.
Because I loved Corel and I used Corel for a long time, and I still, like I said, I think it's a great program and I recommend it all the time to people. But when I came into this industry, I was working for a company that sold a plug-in and action for Photoshop, and so it got me started on Photoshop, and I used it and have not stopped since. So because you go back to we go back to Justin's comment here. He says Adobe changed my mind, right?
With Photoshop, I have a hard time with that because also I love Corel products and I never used because I use in my actual career, my graphic career. So let's go outside of what I do now because I'm not digitizing every day for clients anymore. That's just the truth. I don't love saying it because it makes me feel sad about my digitizing career. But in my day to day, I used both all the time and I maintained a current license the whole time for both. And to be honest with you, I used Corel for all kinds of vector stuff. I did not use Photo Paint for photos. It was Photoshop always.
Yeah.
That is just the honest truth. I did not use Corel's tools for raster. That's just the truth. Because they just weren't as good.
And see, Illustrator to me is that same deal. I did have to do something with vectors, like I've gotten some Illustrator files and I actually had Illustrator for a little while. I'm like, I cannot figure this out, and so
I'm fairly cognizant of all the tools on both Corel and both CorelDRAW and Adobe Illustrator. I have no problem in either of them. Did I heck to the point of okay in a lot of the Adobe suite because we had a full suite pretty early on with the a subscription. So I was like, all right, cool. I'm in. I'm doing InDesign. I'm doing like all that stuff. I just moved over off of all the other suites.
Yeah.
But truthfully, now I've been in Affinity most of the time, and for what I need, it's fine. And also, I worked in Inkscape when Inkscape was super new. The concept of a decent vector graphic software that was, open source. I worked in Inkscape a lot early on to try and help people to have the opportunity. I wanted to kind of democratize that.
Yeah.
But I will say this: every time we're not working with one of the big industry standards, there are little things that are missing, and certainly there are. It's very much like any other software argument that I get into. The top 3 or 4 things that you need to do are pretty similar across the board with all of them.
Yeah.
And then there's the automations and the add-ons and also the ecosystem it lives in. The other reason Corel, and actually, Craig said this, and I think he was right on the money with this one.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that Corel ends up getting so much truck is that if you're in the apparel decoration space, you may have any number of integrations. Either it's, Wellcome's integration. Hey, you're working with Matt in the Rhinestone world, and he has all of his stuff built into Corel Actions.
Yep.
Whichever group you're into, there's a higher likelihood that they're going to have a Corel action than something that's built, in with Illustrator.
Yeah. Yeah. You're exactly right. And what Craig was talking about, the people at Corel have always kind of reached out to the industry and wanted to see how they could better design their products, where you've never heard anybody from Adobe asking a screen printer anything. But because you talk about the fact that, like, you look, one of the things that also stands out to me is you look out there and you have an amazing group of people over there at coreltrainer.com.
Yeah.
Right?
No, absolutely.
And they put all that stock into it. You don't see anybody that's got photoshoptrainer.com or Illustrator Trainer or Adobe.
Adobe's not showing up to the trade shows.
No.
And they don't really have a local person helping you out. And that's not, that doesn't mean that the product's not good. It's excellent. There's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. But in fact, I do prefer a lot of the tools there, but still.
Totally. All right. Let's see. Ramona, I only know about Adobe, not at all. Corel enough to open and look, and if any, just a tad bit. I need stock designs.
Yeah, that's often the case with people. And every time somebody says, "Ugh, Canva, disgusting," and I'm like, well, for a lot of people, that's all they need. Yeah. And especially if you go to the what I call like the Canva Plus version of what you're doing, where Canva tools with some imported graphics on your end.
Yeah.
So that you're not just using the literal stock layouts that pop up when you open it up. I'm not saying that's design. I don't think so, but you can make something look a lot cleaner than or a lot clearer than someone who knows nothing about design work and then has to start from scratch.
So funny that you bring up Canva, actually, Eric, because over at our success group for our members, this last Wednesday, we did a full training on Canva, and, people are going, what? And the very first thing that we were clear about is this is not a design program, right? This is this. And so the way we said, let's unlock the power of Canva for our businesses. And Todd brought this up and he said, the faster you can get that mindset shift to change on Canva, that Canva is a marketing tool, not a design program. So we talked about all that you can use it for in marketing, and then it gets really cool. Could you,
put together a marketing email header faster in Photoshop or in Illustrator than Canva? I don't think so. No, and that's because that's where I'm using it. It's stuff like that. It's marketing assets that need to be knocked together quickly.
Yep, exactly.
Believe me, you can do a lot. Plus, if you have your assets uploaded into the cloud for them to use, you can use your graphics, your assets, and just use their quick layout tools. Sometimes it's just that 5 minutes versus an hour is sometimes what it is. Yeah, but like I said, I'm not saying design t-shirts in Canva. No,
we're definitely not. Okay,
don't do serious design work
before we go down that rabbit hole.
But
and I keep pushing buttons like crazy over here because I finally have the power, so I just feel like
just go for it.
No. So Jeff says, I remember those days. Whoa, I can take out the red eye with these buttons. That's
100%.
Yeah, I think Mike's got a good point here. Adobe versus Corel is like iPhone versus Samsung. Both great, just whatever you're used to using, it seems better. Yeah, I mean, I was an iPhone user for a long time, and then I got to a point where I was doing so much with Google, with being in the Google sphere, from Gmail to Docs to Sheets to Slides and all that stuff, that like, why am I doing this? And so I got a Google Pixel. And it works great, but that's, again, it's my ecosystem. It's and the same thing with the design stuff, right? I don't do design, right? I in fact, I will not even claim to be a designer. I can do production graphics. I can make something ready to print with sublimation.
Yeah.
But no, I'm not going to take a 30 DPI screenshot coming my way and be able to turn that into something printable. I
Now, I
just
have
say no.
most definitely done that. I have absolutely done what, and actually, Craig, once again, whatever you think about his product or whatever else is up to you. But I love the comment he made during the show where he said it was like this digital forensics where you're like, you're going to look at this horrible screenshot and now you're like, all right, what's that font? Is that a line or not? Though every time somebody jokes around about that, I'm like, for a digitizer, that's just life, Jack. You're just looking at a bunch of pixels and hoping to find the line that's supposed to be there and digitize it. That's just, or at least it was for me,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you're always zooming in on poor quality work and trying to decipher where something's supposed to be. So for me,
Yeah.
I feel very comfortable doing that. At the same time,
Yeah.
the presumption is that whatever they provided you was already a design worthy object in the first place, that the art was good whatsoever. And
Uh-huh.
I'm like, that may or may
Yeah.
not be the case.
Yeah. Exactly. All right. So Barb, hello. Thanks for tuning in. Ramona
Absolutely.
says, ditto, Eric. Good clean image works for me.
Old school
There you go.
digitizing. Yes, absolutely. Good
There you
clean
go.
image is what we need.
Mike says, from now on, Aaron needs to use some sort of 8-bit pixelation filter on his webcam. No use for vector. Then you're not allowed to be crisp and clear. All right.
I love that. I
I
mean, I
get it, right?
100% support the Atari filter for Aaron.
Man,
That's fine by me.
getting called out. I love it, actually, by the way.
Yeah,
All right.
it's all good.
Barb uses Photoshop, Corel, Paint Shop Pro, Illustrator, GIMP, Inkscape.
That is how I used to be. Let me tell you what. Everything from open source converters through through any amount of tools it took to get something done. But that's being in a shop, folks.
Yep.
That's being in a shop. Do what you have to do to get it done.
Mike says vector apparel to my CAD background. Raster is like finger painting me, just doesn't work with my brain. See, and I'm the opposite of it, right?
Well, and here's the thing. I started out my very first graphic stuff I did on computers. I mean, I started out as a kid, literally as a child, in computer magnet schools. I went to a gifted school that turned into a computer magnet school because it was like when tech was important as a thing in and of itself. And the first graphics I ever did were like painting pixel by pixel, 256 colors. And probably earlier than the 256. I remember being excited to having all 256 colors, like video game art that you might like retro video game art. So for me, vector was just like a freaking incredible, upscaling in what I could do and how quickly I could do it. I mean, typing in fonts was incredible at that time. And that's from hand-me-down computers to drawing vector. Of course, it feels very powerful, and scaling and everything else. And I think really a lot of the reason you end up doing vector work too. It's like if you're working multidiscipline in shops, if you're doing screen and print and this and that and vinyl cutting and signage, then having that vector becomes much more critical to you because size is so important.
Yeah,
size and scale.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I think a point to make here, just kind of on this overall topic that I want to make is I love the fun. And so, don't get me wrong. Please keep needling me. Please don't stop. That makes me know that you care. But I guess the point that I want to make for folks from more reality based is the main thing is have the tools that you need to be successful and focus on those tools, right? I'm not saying Corel or Illustrator or Photoshop or any of these things are better than the other. And I think that's kind of what we all said here throughout. What I'm saying is know what your limitations are and then understand what you need to do, right? So you've got Jeff here says, here's an 8-bit picture of a flower. I want it on a jacket back, right? And so if somebody came to me with something like that, and if that was my business, either A, I need to learn how to use something to vectorize, or B, what I would probably do is just be like, sorry, I can't use this. Or I'd say, hey, I'm going to call up so-and-so, I'm going to call up Eric, I'm going to call up Jeff, I'm going to call up, whoever's doing this stuff, Todd, and go, all right, how much would it cost you to cost me for you to do this for me? Right. That's, I think that's kind of the point that I wanted to make is just like everybody needs to find the tools that work for their business. And there isn't a one size fits all.
Oh, and 100%. If your raster is the right quality and is going to work, if you're doing digital printing, the raster is fine.
Yep. Absolutely.
It is 100% fine if the quality is good. And one of the problems that we have with raster is that the early days of the internet have poisoned us to the idea that we can use raster graphics because
Yeah.
everything was 72 dpi. It was JPEG, which is a lossy format, which is what that means is that the colors are not solid. You
Uh-huh.
lose colors in the processing of making the
Mhm.
file smaller. So when you zoom in on a field that's supposed to be a solid color, it's actually a bunch of pixels of mangled different colors.
Yep.
And also we were doing things like taking that graphic that's already poor, and then we were converting color models.
Yep.
And so the gamut of colors are going to change on you
Yep.
when you print. And so when you put all together, people were angry at raster graphics partially because the raster graphics that they were specifically using were like cuts from really early web 1 and early web 2
Yep.
websites. If you grab somebody's logo from then, I mean, now there are days where I've grabbed stuff off of websites recently because it's SVG, it's vector. There's
Yeah.
vector being used live as banners and logos and stuff. But back in the day when everything was 72 DPI at the best, and all the
Yeah.
graphics were really small, then rasters were crud because everybody brought in something from their website banner and it was
Yep.
terrible.
Yep.
But that's not the case right now necessarily. And if someone, and also we have a much more savvy clientele, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's, even though we joke around about how our clients don't know anything about graphics and all this other stuff, in general, they are more savvy about digital formats. They're more savvy about art than they used to be.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's more likely they'll have a higher resolution starter. Not all the
Sure.
time, and still people are copying crap. And I think the worst thing is screenshots.
Yeah.
Screenshots off phones. That's
Screenshots.
just the
Yeah.
worst.
Yeah.
But there are more people who can get it, or at the very least, there's more chances that the asset they have is something we can get.
Yeah.
It's
I
possible.
saw a thing recently. We were talking about the customers being more savvy and having, like, somebody was lamenting the fact that they were tired of getting the artwork for that people had made on Canva, right? And they wanted to reproduce
Sure,
this, and
sure.
and it was interesting. I mean, people using the free version, so they're basically
Yeah, that's true.
not
You're
able to
gated
have a
to high
transparent
res.
background, and then obviously it's not a,
Sure.
even if you save it as an SVG file, it's still not an actual vector, right? So there was that. But the funny part was somebody that had been doing this for a while longer jumped in and said, you know what, though? The stuff you get from Canva is way better than the crap we used to get from Microsoft Publisher.
Yep, it is. Not to
So
mention, I'm
it's
going to
all
flat say
relative.
this. If you yourself as an artist who gets a bunch of Canva stuff buys yourself a Canva Plus subscription, you now have all the fonts, you know exactly where they came from, you know where all the graphic assets came from that they were
Yep.
using, and you can find everything. That is already 100% better than somebody's
Yeah.
random stuff from a clip art book that you may or may not own that was installed with whatever
Yeah.
version of word processing software that they had back in the day. That was a lot worse.
Yes, it was.
Aside from the only good thing about that is everyone had Microsoft everything, so all the fonts were Arial. Now,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
funny thing is, in 2022, with the anti-design movement, now we're having people who are using those junk fonts again and being sincere about it. Because the anti-design movement makes everything look like it was from Publisher from 1996. But but at the same time, like, I mean, there is something to the concept that at least the layout's good. At least they have a color scheme that works.
Yeah.
At least I know where to go get these fonts. Most of them open source.
Yeah.
You never know.
Totally. All right, getting back into the comments here, and I know we're kind of
Digitizing.
off
Yep.
off the line of conversation, but
Hey,
we can
why
talk
not?
to follow the same pixel line in the artwork for your line. Ugh. And then Justin said, "You're describing finding the edge to digitizing, just as I'm leaning forward to find the edge to digitizing."
Absolutely. Zooming in on a hamburger and saying, okay, which side of this pixelated edge is the actual edge? And let me tell you this, folks, everybody who's like, oh, vector is so much better. Crap true type fonts come in with bad nodes, with weird reverse handles, and the vector itself is bad and
Yeah.
often auto traced. So everybody says, oh, it's great to bring in, and oh, we got vector. Vector for embroidery doesn't always mean anything because a lot of the stitch processing doesn't work very well if the vector is bad.
Yeah.
So auto stitch processing, you're still redrawing, kids.
And Jeremy says it's like water torture. You have to tell them 1,000 times until they actually get it. Yep. Yeah.
True.
That educational
can
process can be a bit traumatizing.
Also, for us, we may see 1,000 clients who all have the same problem. They only see us.
Yeah,
So for us,
exactly.
we're hearing the same thing a lot.
Yeah, over and over and over again. Mike says there are certain tools, intuitive in CAD, that I find myself longing for in digitizing and or vector graphic work. Some things CAD couldn't live without are expensive elements and Wilcom. So
this is true.
What would be an example of that for us uneducated?
Well, stuff like they're like echoing out shapes having multiple outlines.
Gotcha.
There's certain fill types, certain other things, and admittedly, it depends on what software you're with. Like one of the ones that gets me, and this is not a quality thing. Love Wilcom, love Stitch Artist, love Pulse. They all do good work. There's lots of different software, so I'm not going to say that. But
Yeah.
like Stitch Artist comes with curved fills. Wilcom curved fills is an add-on. And I've had people complain because I teach a lot of curved fills, and I'm like, oh man, curved fills are just so. Ever since they came out, I've used them and I love them. I hate to say it, I'm like, man, just get that, just get the add-on. But when you're talking about drawing tools, yeah, that's the hard part. Things like the way that you do shaping in Illustrator, the way you punch things out and use the Pathfinder tool, those are not always the same. It's not, that metaphor isn't exactly the same in embroidery. And in fact, software like Wilcom, I love Wilcom, but it defaults to a spline method of drawing, which is not, if you're a graphics or a CAD person, you feel weird because you can't draw with Bezier. You're drawing in a spline method, and it's not very normal for everybody. Splines are where it makes them really easy. As long as you want to get a curve, you just keep on drawing curved nodes, and as many as you put in, the line tries to approximate through all those little nodes.
Gotcha.
Whereas Bezier, we all know you grab the handles and you move them, and you get your continuous curve exactly the way you want it, but you do have to know how to handle the handles and the stretching. It is just different. But yeah, alignments, there's a lot of stuff. Alignments, custom outlines, stuff like that can be issues. But yeah, it depends on your software and also the mode. That's the thing. If we think about digitizing software, I won't go too far off on this. I'll try and keep this short. The two modes that come up, and I've taught this and talked about it and written about it, digitizing software has a lot of baked in from the original era of digitizing when it was stitch by stitch, and then the intermediate era of digitizing when people were still moving from that stitch by stitch method into doing things in blocks, and it wasn't vector the way we understand it now, and the tools were made to help you do correct stitch types. Like why do we have the two-sided entry? Because we're using a column of satin stitches. It's made for the stitch type. And so those tools are super embroidery specific, but if you're coming from the drawing side of it, it can make you feel really weird to have these tools that don't draw the way you draw a vector, where a shape is a shape is a shape, and you decide what to do with it. It's very different to have these tools that honestly are from the legacy of punching. They're from the legacy of punching to digitizing, and then through that legacy tool set kind of can make people feel weird if they come from a CAD or Illustrator or vector background sometimes. And there really can be a disconnect depending on the tool you're using. What the kind of educational mode they expect it to be in.
Yeah.
Some people make digitizing software like it is drawing software that does stitches. Other people have digitizing software with some pedigree that is a stitch software, that is an embroidery software that now, especially these days, has vector tools kind of built back into it, or at least vector methodologies for making a shape. So there's like way more than anybody needed to know, but that's why this happens a lot. That's why there's where we chop up, and why I've often taught, hey, if you're a graphic designer, here are the things that are going to drive you nuts, and here are the things that are going to be helpful about your training.
Yeah.
Before you start digitizing, here's what's going to drive you nuts, and here's what you're going to actually be able to do better than somebody who doesn't know how to draw.
Yeah. All right. Well, Mike shared even just aligning elements by side, center, etc., is an add-on for digitizing, but just a base function of CAD. So I think that's kind of what you were talking about there.
Yeah, and also things that you wouldn't expect, like there's certain kinds of alignments or filling or repeats that can be that aren't thought of in embroidery the same way as they are in And like I said, I've done some CAD and cutting. I did a lot of vinyl work, so there's tiling and other stuff that I used to do when I did cutting and vinyl work and signage that isn't in the embroidery software, which is also why I would go back and forth between 5 softwares and just drag my vectors around. Once we had vector import in all the embroidery software, I would work vector sometimes and then bring it in. Yeah. Especially, like you say, alignments and tracking on lines and different ways of doing contours. It took a long time for embroidery software to have that.
Yeah. Got it. All right. So Ramona, just like in embroidery, they send over the EMB file. It is actually the DTS file saved in the EMB format. Yep, you get it.
Yeah, that's the raster vector. That's the EPS file that has a bitmap in it. Yep. Yeah, we've all done it.
Yeah. All right. Mike says, here comes Comic Sans and Papyrus. I will have to admit that I did use some Comic Sans back in my day. So that back in my Corel days, that Comic Sans was actually one that I used a lot. So when I started seeing people like going, oh, it's so terrible, I'm like, oops.
Sincerely, if you want to see crazy cool stuff and weird stuff that Gen Z is doing right now and people who are young, go look up the anti-design movement. There's some wild layouts and stuff that really feel like early cut and paste zine days and stuff. It's bizarre. They're doing some crazy stuff.
Yep. All right, Marianne, a little late, but here. And then,
right on.
All right.
Happy.
We said we want to get to all of the questions, so we'll do our best here. We'll see what's still showing up. So, last but not least, Erich, your take here on said question.
Oh man, why do you guys always hit me with these hard-hitting questions? I mean, I hate to call people out once again talking about graphics. Who's the worst company to buy graphics from? And Todd knows that this is a hard question to pose, but we got to hit those hard-hitting questions.
We do.
If I have to choose one worst company to get stock designs from, and I mean,